Welcome to the Business Objects Educational Exchange. For those that attended this exchange on October 17th of 2018, you were aware that we had some phone issues where there wasn't sound coming through the computer. When we went to process the recording, turns out that because the sound wasn't going through the computer, we recorded no sound. To be fair to everybody so that this demonstration is useful, we're re-recording the demonstration with less of an audience and different jokes. They might not be as funny. I don't know if they were funny in the first place. But just for those that are joining us for the first time, the Business Objects Educational Exchange is a roughly quarterly event where we will pick a specific aspect of business objects to demonstrate, to share with you, and help you to improve your skills in business objects. Also, though it won't be included in here because there's no audience, we usually will allow people to ask questions, things that they may be struggling with on their own in business objects. We will be posting the recording, that's the silent film version, also in the Bugs University where you found this. So you can see all the questions. Unfortunately, like I said, there is no sound attached to that one. My name is Matt Bird. I'm the finance manager in the Office of Tribal Transportation. Also a member of the Business Objects User Group Steering Committee, also known as the BUGS. So the B, as I explained, 3 or 4 sessions a year where we invite anyone who is interested in business objects to learn more, bring questions, and enhance their ability to access data to improve their data science. So this demonstration is to show you some of the things that have been added. There was an upgrade to business objects as far as FHWA is using it. There was an upgrade in July of 2018, which added several features. It took us quite a leap ahead. So some of the cool visualizations are what we're going to be demonstrating today. Just to remind you, this will always come into play whenever we talk about any graphs, charts, or other visualizations. Very important to understand the difference between a dimension and a measure in business objects. You can read this as I explain it, but a dimension is something that has a unique characteristic to whatever data set you're looking at. An example, when we use the projects universe in business objects, which we frequently do, project number, for example, is a unique characteristic. You don't have more than one project numbers attached to a project because it is a single project. So that's an example. A measure is something that does not have a unique characteristic, could change. Examples of measures are the amount of funding, either obligated or expended or otherwise on a project, because that could change from report to report, but the project number wouldn't change. Another example of a dimension would be a program code. You might have several program codes on a project, but the nature of a program code is unique. That's what a dimension is. And a measure is a mathematical number associated with a measure, and typically it's something that you would do mathematics, basic arithmetic or whatever on. So keep that in mind, because in charts, the Y graph and the X graph are dependent on the dimension and measure. When you graph something, you chart a dimension with respect to measures. So keep that in mind. And we'll go into business objects now. I'm going to take you from the ground up on a report, and we'll be demonstrating 2 particular visualizations in this demonstration. So first of all, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to do a brand new report. And yes, we're going to use the projects universe for this demonstration. So there we go, FEMAS 5 Project Information Universe. Alright, so the items I'm going to include the recipient name. You could do code or postal abbreviation. I'm going to use the name. I'm going to put it both as a query filter and as a result object. Also going to include the project number. I usually always do that when I'm dealing with Project Universe because sometimes I might want to use the number of projects, the count of the projects, and so I usually define a simple variable for counting the projects, even though there is actually a measure down here that is project count. Also, for the sake of our demonstration today, I'm going to include the county description as a result object. Now, whenever you go into this realm of county codes, urban codes, improvement types, all of those kind of things, where if you were looking in FEMAS, you would see them under the detail screens. don't ever put expenditures into your report if you're also including those dimensions, because it will automatically zero out. Just a reminder, I am, however, going to include the FY obligation amount in this report, because that's actually what I'm going to be charting. So since I still, even though I work for the Office of Tribal Transportation, I still live in Oregon and still hold the Oregon Division dear to my heart. I'm going to use Oregon, also because there aren't a huge number of counties in Oregon, for this report to start out. So I'm just running a very simple report of the project number, county description, and fiscal year obligations amount. I'm going to run the query. Because we're fairly early on in the fiscal year this year, I'm going to use FY18, so the September 2018 data set is the complete fiscal year 18, so we actually have some things to look at. And I'll run the report now. This table over here isn't all that important for the demonstration. It's just going to kind of sit there as a sidebar, but we'll really be looking at different visualizations that I'll be displaying over here. The first one, which I want to demonstrate, is a geochoropleth chart. So if you look, there's three different types of geographic charts now. There's a choropleth chart, a bubble chart, and a pie chart. You've probably seen all of these at some point on different things throughout your experience as people demonstrate using a map, quantities and population and things like that. I'm using the choropleth chart because it's the one that fills in the areas as opposed to just draws circles on them. And as you can see, I start out, I have just a blank gray map of the world. And if I wanted to include things in the chart, I would go here to assign the data. And here's where the conception of having the dimensions and measures. The key items would be dimensions. You'll notice they're all grayed out. I'll explain why in a second. But you have the dimensions are the key items and the values are measures. That's important. That's why we need to know the difference between dimensions and measures when you're choosing your data set and what you're going to display, because one of these is going to be a measure, the other is going to be a dimension. I can't do that right now because I don't have any geographic items. Now you might think, well, counties are geographic, and that is true, but Business Objects right at this moment in our demonstration doesn't know that counties are a geographic location. It just sees them as another result object. To change that, what you'll do, and you can actually do this to all of them, but some of them, obviously project number, you're not going to be able to find geographic locations for that. But on county description, right-click, and it might take a couple times right-clicking, and you'll get edit as geography as an option. And we're going to do by name because there's no latitude and longitude in this description of the county. So by name, and this is where things start getting kind of cool. You're editing this dimension as geography, telling Business Objects these are places on a map. You'll have to choose which level of geography. You've got a country, a region, a sub-region, and a city. For the sake of United States, the country is the United States. The regions are states, sub-regions are counties, and cities are cities. Because these are counties, we'll choose sub-region. Now it's kind of going through its whole geographic database, comparing the names of all the counties that are in my data set with a database that is provided by Business Objects that covers the whole world and all the different levels of geography that exist. And it's trying to line up the counties in Oregon with that data set. And so what it'll show you, there's different symbols. So an exclamation point means that it couldn't figure out which one. For example, with Baker County, there's 3 different options. And it doesn't know, because even though the recipient name is Oregon, it doesn't know that we're actually looking at Oregon. So you'll have to go through your list and tell it, I'm looking for Baker County, Oregon. Now, I'm not going to go through all these because you'll see down here there's a couple where it's a red X. When it sees that, it says, I don't have a clue. I'm not sure how to go with this. And you can see that makes sense. We've got not defined and statewide. Neither one of those are actually counties or even locations. If you're going to do these maps, it's important that if you have these things, and most states will have not defined and statewide, at least as two things that you're going to have to filter out. What we've got to do is we've got to back out of this edit as geography for a second. So I'm going to cancel. I'm going to go back, and I did this just to demonstrate that you're going to run into a hiccup if you don't do what I'm about to demonstrate in the first place. And that is you go back into your query panel. We're going to add county description as a filter. And you could do in list or not in list because you have to select less. I recommend do not in list, and then choose values from list. You first of all have to choose the recipient. So I'm going to choose as a recipient Oregon. Once I've selected Oregon as a recipient, then I can go to the county description list and find those, not defined and statewide. And so what I'm doing is I'm telling the query to filter out not defined and statewide in my data set. Because if I can't complete that defining as geography, if there's missing items, it won't let me proceed on. It'll wait until I've got everything defined. So I'm going to eliminate them from my data sets so that I don't have to fight them. And run the query again. Once again, I will right-click on County Description, edit as Geography by name. My level will be a sub-region because, again, we're talking about counties. And now I just go down the list and select all of the appropriate locations for Oregon. Now, as I go here, you're going to see when I get to a few of the counties that there's something weird that is in the business objects data set regarding the counties. And I think this is fairly universal across the data set, that there are just some that are weird. Most of them you can see. You also get a little geography lesson to see how many counties have those names scattered across the country. But most of them you'll see, you just find that county in the state you're looking for. Now here's the first one where that's not the case. So I scan down, I'm looking for Oregon, 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 and I don't see what I'm expecting except for this Maple Grove Cemetery. Don't know why, but in some cases it knows this is Marion County, but it's displaying Maple Grove Cemetery, which is a specific location in Marion County, Oregon, by the way. You might have to recognize that there will be some weird names for some of the counties. If you're not sure, in fact, it's displaying something, just look up that location in the county and see if it really exists. In Oregon, there are 3 counties that have weirdness. Like here's another one. Settling Pond, which is in Union County. You have to scroll down. There's a ton of Washington counties. Can't imagine why there's so many Washington counties in the United States of America. But down at the bottom, here's where Oregon was. Okay, so we've defined all of our counties now. And so I'm going to hit OK. You can see there's 36, all of them are resolved, so it's going to let me continue on. I hit OK. Now I'm ready to define the variables that go into this choropleth chart. Now you can see it's got a selection that's not grayed out. County description I can actually choose, which I will, as my key item, and then for the sake of this display I'm going to add fiscal year obligations as my item value. So what I'm going to get is a chart of Oregon that has different color scale based on the amount of obligations that were made in that county during fiscal year 18. And you can see as I kind of drag my cursor around, you can hover over each county and it'll show you which county it is and the amount of obligations are in each county. So that's kind of a useful feature. You can actually get the data right off the visual there. You can see Lane County got the lion's share of the funding. It's got $247 million compared to others. Like the next highest is $65 million. Well, I guess there's $101 million over there. You see that the darker it gets, the more money that county got. So, useful feature. This is what it'll look like, whatever state you choose. It'll have a similar look once you've defined it. But you have a lot of customization options here. And for those that were at the official soundless demonstration, we had a hard time explaining how you control all the colors. So I'm going to demonstrate that here. To change the color, the edges of basically the lines around the counties, you just go to this edge color thing, change the color. If you apply, you'll see it's suddenly going to be all black. Now I've got black lines around all the counties. You can choose whatever color you want. I'll stick with black for now just because it's different. The next thing that you can do is, if you have oceans surrounding you and you don't like white water, you can change that. And you could either just say, okay, just make the water, I don't know, this color blue. You can see it updates. It's now got that color of blue. I can also do the same thing with, it says geographic context. That's essentially the gray area that you're seeing here. It's just something that it knows it's geographic, but there's no data. You could give it another color. I'll go ahead and make it brown. So now you can kind of see I've got this area around. It's starting to take some shape here. But there's some other things I want to do. Another one is if I don't want to have a legend. So I got to switch, and here's the part we were struggling with a little bit. I got to switch over in this from plot area to global. And then I'm going to go to area display. This allows me to control. I can take off the legend just by unclicking in the area display legend. You'll see now the chart just got a little bit bigger because there's no, I'm going to move it a little bit. Just so it's off to the side a little bit more while I'm editing the characteristics. So again, I'm going to go from plot area, I'm going to go back to global. And then palette and style. Here's where you have a lot of control over what's going to be colored here. And here's where you can kind of choose. You can choose your color palette. If you do this, it's going to kind of automatically assign colors. It doesn't really work all that well from what I've been able to see. It just kind of just picks one color unless you start adding a lot more variables in. But you can control, like, you can see this is basically a gradient from light blue to dark blue. I could change that. Say I wanted it to go from red to dark blue. You just use a gradient-based palette. But when I apply that, you'll see a dramatic change happens here to the chart. Now I've got a whole lot of red and just some blue. If you want a little bit more variation in the color, you can choose the 3-step gradient. So say that it starts out with red, then maybe goes to yellow, and then to blue. You apply that, and you can see now I'm getting a lot more variation. The yellows are kind of the middle of the line, red's the low, and blue's the high. Another option, if that's pretty stark coloring, you could pick a slightly less dramatic color scheme, like saying going from light green to dark blue. So that's nice. Another option which kind of says a lot is if you choose the lowest color as white. And so now here you have the white ones are the ones that have gotten very little money, and blue has a whole bunch of, so there's a lot of variations in how you can get it to color it in. It does color in, though, by the measure that you chose. So the highest, in this case, fiscal year obligations get the end color, and the lowest get the start color. You could also, if you want to add a little more variation, you could add a number of ranges. So let's say if I just take this to 10 ranges, watch what happens to the shading. So now effectively I added 10 different possible shades on the map. So that gives you a little more, essentially, resolution on the chart and how you're demonstrating the data. That's how you do these choropleth charts. There's a lot of customization available. You can make it look however you want. Oh, one more thing I will demonstrate, actually. And you can do this in the plot area. Say you didn't want just the flat blue and the flat brown there. I could go here, geographic context color, which is the brown right now. I could make it a gradient. And say I want it to be a gradient from, say, a lighter brown to a darker brown. Maybe not quite that much. And I can control how it is, so I'll do a diagonal up. And you apply that, and now it adds just a little more texturing, a little more gradient to the background. You can do the same thing with the water if you wanted to. So that's the first demonstration of how to use a choropleth chart. One thing I didn't point out, but hopefully it was obvious, once you've defined the data set, you've assigned the data, it will zoom in to just whatever data is included in your data set, going from the whole world down to whatever's included. If you accidentally chose the wrong county, you'd see suddenly a county scattered somewhere else in the United States, and so you need to go back and edit that and fix it. Okay, second demonstration I want to do, which is also a lot of fun, is a tag cloud. So a tag cloud, you've seen these. Tag cloud is where it shows a bunch of words, and the words, they're different sizes, usually used when it's showing how many times a word is used in something. In this case, we're going to use it to show, just by the name of the county, which counties are receiving the most fiscal year obligations. We're going to save this tags family for a second, but the weight of the tags is based off of the obligations in that county. When I apply that, it builds a tag cloud. So there you have it. So just like up here where we could see Lane County got the lion's share of the funding, here's another way to see it. You got Lane County getting the lion's share of the funding. Before I do anything, I'm going to move it over just like I did the other one. And the controls are similar but not the same for this type of chart. In the plot area, like you've got level coloring 6, which isn't going to come into play right now. Right now, if you're good with just how this looks, and maybe say you wanted to change the color. Say you wanted all the text to be red. So you just go to the tags font. You could change the font. Let me go ahead and do that. I'll do Times New Roman and red. Don't worry about the font size. It actually doesn't control much. And you can see, there it is, all red in Times New Roman. I don't recommend Times New Roman as a good font for using for the tag clouds. They just don't seem to look as nice, I guess. But I'll go back to Arial for now. You can toy around with all the fonts. It's not got every font available, it's just this limited list of fonts. Another thing you'll notice is that all of the tags are just horizontal. If you've seen most tag clouds, they usually kind of vary between horizontal and vertical. This one's mainly horizontal. It might have thrown in a vertical one if it fit well. But if I go to horizontal and vertical, you'll see now it kind of splits it fairly evenly between horizontal and vertical. It just kind of throws them in there however it can. You can do mostly vertical, which looks kind of funky. Makes you feel like you need to lean on your side. But this one, I think the horizontal and vertical is very comfortable for people. It's very similar to what they're used to seeing when they do these kind of charts. Now, so we just changed the color to red. That's what you would do if you're in the plot area. There's a lot more control if you go to the global area. On the area display, you can change the legend from visible. Apply that. It's going to make the tag cloud bigger because I eliminated the legend. Then I can go to the palette and style again like we saw on the other chart. But you'll notice that it's got colors defined, but none of them are over here. The reason none of them are over there is because I have not yet defined, when you saw me assigning data, I haven't defined a tag family. A tag family is how you get it to essentially create another dimension of this chart. Right now it's just displaying, based on the fiscal year obligations, which county got the most. If you wanted to say, for example, and this is why I put project number into the report, I'm going to say, well, maybe I want to see, okay, how much money they got, but I also want to see how many projects they delivered. So I'm going to use project count. I'm going to demonstrate the formula I use when I'm developing a project count. I did point out there is a measure already defined that is project count. You don't need to use what I'm doing, but I don't know, maybe I'd like too much control of the world or something. So I'm going to count project number, and then I usually add this, even though when you're dealing with one state it doesn't matter, with a semicolon all after it. That allows you to count, like say that there were multiple counties with the same name, which you saw there were. It would allow you to count all projects that have the same project number and the same county. But not, so that's just a habit that I have, is just putting that all in there whenever I define this variable. So now I have project count defined as a variable. I'm going to go back over to this tag cloud, and I'm going to add as a tag family the project count. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm saying by county, show me by the size of the text which county got the most money, and by the color of the text which counties got the most projects. So I'm going to apply this. It already has colors defined, so you're going to see it applies those colors automatically. So you can see Lane County had the most money, but if you know the scale, Multnomah had the most projects. And this allows you, I'm going to go back into the global formatting and go to the palette and style. And now I can customize all these colors. Say instead of having quite so much contrast, let's say I want to start with a light orange, then go to a darker orange, and then go to really, really, really dark orange. I apply that, and now you can see I've got the lighter orange, the darker orange, and the really dark orange. So this is really a two dimensions plus a measure. Is that three-dimensional or just two-dimensional? You decide. A chart that shows both of those characteristics all in one. So that's a way to control the display. And as you saw here, I still have a control over the number of ranges. If I wanted to add, I've got 10 ranges instead of 5. I apply it, and you'll see now there's more gradient to it. I don't have actually as many light colors as I did before, because probably there's a minimum number of projects. So you want to kind of toy around until you get with the chart that best displays the data you're trying to display. So that is 2 new visualizations that exist and are available to you as Business Objects users. You can toy around with them, think of their best uses, think of how you could use it to visually display data to managers that may not be very patient with looking at Excel spreadsheets or something like that, and they just want to see the answer really quickly. Visualizations are the key to that. That is the 21st century approach to showing data, is by visualization. So it's good that we get used to this way of approaching our data. And so with that, I want to conclude by recommending that you continue to get help. We don't have any questions. You continue to get help in the Business Objects universe. If you have questions, feel free to ask us. Feel free to reach out to the Business Objects User Group Steering Committee. Our email address is fhwa.bugs@dot.gov. And we would be happy to help you. Definitely get some experience with Business Objects. It will help you to be able to display and share information with the people that you present data to.